joining me today. It's Brian Gubernick, and welcome to the No Days Off podcast, where we believe that every single day brings a new opportunity to get better. Let's get into today's topic. Today, I would like to talk about difficult decisions, the process to making difficult decisions. I'd like to start by telling a story. Actually, we're going to base this podcast around a very, very difficult decision, a story around a very difficult decision. And that is a decision that was made by Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill, as I'm sure everybody knows, is one of the greatest leaders in history, certainly one of the greatest leaders over the past century, and had many, many ups and downs throughout his career, many difficult decisions as he led through turbulent times, specifically World War II. And he had very difficult moves he had to make, probably none harder than the one we're going to discuss today. During World War II, France, an ally of England, fell to German forces. That was in June of 1940. And the British government, specifically Churchill, was faced with a very, very difficult decision or situation, I should say, concerning the French army, the French Navy. The concern was that the French fleet, could be taken over by the Germans, who just took over or started taking over France, because France had fallen to Germany. The French Navy and its fleet could fall into the hands of Germany, and that would pose a massive threat to England and to the Allied forces. Churchill was the Prime Minister of Britain at that time, and he was faced with this decision. What was the decision? The decision was what to do about the French Navy. See, a significant portion of the French Navy was stationed at a port in France, and Churchill dispatched a naval force, a British naval force, to deliver an ultimatum to France. What they had demanded of France was that they either join the Royal Navy, the British Navy, and continue the fight against Germany and the Axis powers. They take that fleet. Another option was to take that French fleet to British-controlled ports, or lastly, render their fleet inoperable so that the Germans couldn't use it. Bottom line, if the Germans got their hands on this French Navy, this French fleet, it would pose significant risk to England, the Allied forces, and the world at large. So Britain and Churchill gave France the option: join us, or park your boats over here, or make them inoperable. Those are your three choices. Well, the French decided to reject those demands. Negotiations fell apart, and Churchill had a decision to make. On July 3rd, 1940, Winston Churchill ordered a military operation. That military operation was known as Operation Catapult. And the operation aimed to secure the French fleet and prevent it from being seized by the Germans. So what the British ended up doing was attack the French fleet. And in doing so, battle resulted between the English and the French. The English sunk a French battleship, severely damaged other French ships, and even the British had some casualties. This attack on an ally of England, this attack on France, its neighbor, caused a massive amount of controversy. And it strained relationships between England and France. It goes without saying. France saw this as a betrayal. And it already further complicated, I should say, an already pretty delicate situation between those two countries during the war. Churchill had to make this call, and I can only imagine how difficult it was, because it was a strategic call, and his decision was driven by strategic considerations, that being to prevent the French Navy from falling into German hands. But he had to attack an ally. He had to prioritize national security over diplomatic considerations. England and France are historically tied. But Churchill believed that he had to safeguard the interests of the British Empire. He had to safeguard the interests of the Allies, the Allied forces, I should say. And that took precedent over that relationship with France. This is an insanely difficult choice. I mean, it's clearly a very difficult choice in warfare. But choosing to bomb the fleet of an ally that had been alongside them for hundreds of years, thousands of years. I mean, these countries have coexisted for a long time. And to bomb them was undoubtedly difficult and clearly controversial. French lives were lost. And yet, Churchill had to make that decision. Not only did he have to make that decision, for the rest of his tenure, he had to defend that decision. He had to explain that while France is an ally, they couldn't have the fleet be handed over to Germany. It remains, that event, that bombing of the French Navy, remains one of the most significant events in World War II. And it was one of probably many difficult decisions and moral decisions or moral complexities that leaders were facing at that time and that facing war in general. Why am I telling this story? I don't love using war for purposes of example. I think that it's not really fair. I don't know if it's really right. But I like to point at war in this particular scenario because there was no greater decision. Lives were at stake. Countries' existence were at stake. And Winston had to make a significant decision and place the greater good in front of the relationship of an ally, knowing that this would strain relationships between those two countries indefinitely. What a difficult decision. And what amazing, some would say bravery, some would say confidence, whatever the case may be, what amazing certainty he had to have to make a call of that nature. Makes me think about decisions that we all have to make. More specifically, what decisions are we choosing not to make that we know may be for the greater good, but we're worried about repercussions, maybe even lesser repercussions? In other words, where might we have to sacrifice the good in order to get the great? Now, that's not my opinion necessarily on this matter, but that's where I'd like to take this conversation. Right? What decision are we afraid to make? Are we not willing to make? But if we did make it, we'd potentially go from a good scenario to a better one. Now, the example I gave was not a good to a better necessarily. It was bad. It was from a bad spot to maybe a less bad spot. But in life, in relationships, in our world today, we have to make difficult decisions. None as tough as Winston's, but we have to make some difficult calls. Where are we unwilling right now to make that difficult decision? What are we running from right now? What are we avoiding? What call are we scared to make? And what might happen if we take a stand today and make that decision? Recognizing that there's going to be some short-term pain, but potentially long-term benefit. World War II could have gone quite a different direction had Winston not made this decision. Clearly a much bigger decision than most any of us will ever make in our lives. But what decision are you not making right now that's jeopardizing your future? Something to think about today when we talk around difficult decisions and the calls you need to make in business and in life. That's all we have for today, the No Days Off podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, every single day brings a new opportunity to get better. So let's get after it.